Hello, my name is Michał Grela, and I'd like to welcome you to the next episode of IT Leadership Insights by Future Processing. Steve Jobs once said that innovation is what distinguishes leaders and the followers. And as organizations, we all aspire to be at the forefront of innovation, to have this competitive advantage over others. But at the end of the day, implementing innovation is not that easy. Today, my guest is Essi Dachlin, a digital strategy advisor at Sogeti, who is well experienced in implementing innovation, particularly including areas such as artificial intelligence. Hi, welcome to this episode. I'm very happy to have you here with me. But before we dive deep into the topic, could you please say a few words about yourself, please?
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. In my work, I consult different business leaders in how to address challenges facing their industries with the help of technology and innovation. I also lead different kinds of innovation projects, often related to AI.
Let's start. Innovation means something different for everybody and depends from the point of view. To those who are using pen and paper, introducing a simple Excel spreadsheet would be innovative. But for others, it would be about AI or quantum computing. What's your definition of innovation? How do you perceive it personally?
Well, I think it's quite simple, actually. It's about inventing and connecting that to a market value or a use of some sort. It could be a public use for society, for example, as well. But you can own hundreds of patents for different inventions. But unless it's actually useful, it's not an innovation in my point of view.
So from your perspective, the idea is not innovative unless there's a use case for it.
Yes, that's right.
That's a very practical point of view.
Yes, I think so. And I also think that it's since it's depending on the use of our time when it's actually implementing, it could be an invention at one point, but later on, maybe it's not the time for it, just the market is not ready for it, maybe the infrastructure is not built for it, but 10 years later, it could become an innovation.
So aside from the aspiration of becoming an industry leader, where does the need for innovation actually come from?
Well, I think it's basically rooted within most of us anyway. For survival purposes, we have always aspired to improve our living conditions and become more and more efficient using machineries of different kinds. And of course, to use as little of energy as possible. Unfortunately, this has tipped over the bridge right now in the world, where obesity is a huge problem. But we have that kind of built in ourselves to do as little as possible, to be as efficient.
So it's deeply rooted in humankind.
Yes, exactly.
It's that deep.
Yes, it's that deep.
Can or should everyone be an innovator then? Since you've said that it is in all of us, should we all sort of aspire to take it from there?
Yeah, we all have different personality skills, of course, and we are more leaned to being innovative or not, and being more afraid or averse to risks and averse to change overall. But as a humanity, we are built for innovation, and I think we should aspire, every one of us, to be innovative. Think about when you were a child, for example. Even up to about 12 years old, we are all very creative. We are looking at the world from a child's eyes, and we are questioning everything and coming up with great solutions to every problem in the world. And then somehow we are taught that this is difficult and this is impossible and so on. But this can be retaught, and we can train to be more creative and innovative again.
So in this case, is innovation about technology, or does it have a broader scope?
Definitely a broader scope. Technology, I mean, now we live in a digital age. So innovation nowadays, we often talk about innovation related to digital technology and to the new business models and the new possibilities related to the new technology, like AI, blockchain, and so on. But innovation has been around for forever. And look at the industrialization, for example, when we came up with machines that made human labor much more efficient.
That's it. Yeah.
So it's not about technology. It's processes, for example. You can innovate with processes, and that has nothing to do with technology at all. So there's a large scope of innovation.
Focusing about the tech-related innovation, then, since we're in IT Leadership Insights episode, what do you start with? What do you start with? What are the initial phases of actually thinking about implementing innovation within organization, technology-wise?
Well, it's a difficult question, of course. It depends on where you are at. And it also depends on where you want to innovate. You can innovate more breakthrough innovations and focus on that to gain a huge marketing and competitive advantage, and try to maybe open up a whole new market that is not there today. And you can also work on more sustainable and incremental innovation that is maybe innovative for your company, but it's not a breakthrough innovation. So it depends on where you are and what your ambitions and goals are. But I think you should look at from an overview perspective, what are the biggest problems you have in your company today? And how could you create an innovation portfolio? But from taking it from there to actually getting a result, it's not just about something written in a document or a tool you implement, but it's much more with the people, with the culture and the processes.
That was to be my another question. Isn't it all about people at the end of the day? Like even if you think about implementing different kinds of technologies, still you need a team to do the job.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't it come down to having the right skills on board and the attitude on board to be open-minded enough to implement this innovation?
Yes, and attitude, that is a good example, because it's so important to have that kind of culture that
But how do you foster that? How do you get there?
Well, you can get there from two perspectives, actually, from 2 points. Both, if you're doing it from both perspectives, it's the best, I would say.
What are these perspectives?
It's the top, bottom, and bottom, top. So you can, I know from examples, companies where different teams have gone rogue, actually, creating different products without the knowledge and without the consent of leaders in the company, and actually have pushed some of the budget to that product under the radar. And from top down, it's important for the leaders to be role models and to actually show and be perceived as innovative, to take risks in moderate, of course, but also to show how we handle people when they do mistakes. And when we take a road and it doesn't go very well, it didn't go as planned, how do we react to that? Do we take it as a learning, or do we take more serious actions?
The example always comes from the above.
Yes, the good examples.
Hopefully good ones, but bad ones as well, unfortunately. But were you to give your top pieces of advice for companies who are struggling to implement innovation or are willing to do so but don't know how to start, what would this advice be?
I think if you are a novice in that innovation area, I think start small. Start with 1 or 2 teams that you are dedicating to innovation, or at least 50% of the work time, and find those apples that are very close to the ground. So
what you're saying is, go with your natural flow of the company, stick to the core, but at the same time allocate some resources to uh, thinking about ways, finding
Yeah.
ways for improvement.
Yes, if you don't have a natural corporate culture of innovation, many organizations create like innovation labs and so on.
Okay.
Maybe it's like an organization within the organization
Like an
that
R&D department?
is
More than
not
that.
not like an R&D department, but it's more of an autonomous department that runs by their own rules and so on, to give them space for innovation. And that is a good idea if you're totally novice and you have a large traditional organization that just can't keep up with this new way of thinking and working. But the challenge with doing that is what happens when you need to scale. When you have that innovation and you can actually prove its worth, but you need to scale it. If you don't have the platforms or the infrastructures or the processes or the culture in the rest of the company, it's very difficult to implement it in a very useful way in the company overall.
Well, there was plenty. Thank you. It was very, very interesting, and this conversation was full of interesting information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, our viewers, for watching another episode of IT Leadership Insights. If you found it useful, please don't hesitate to like it and share it on social media. And please do drop us a line if you wish to have another topic covered in IT Leadership Insights. Thank you.